A debate was supposed to be predictable. The kind of event where both candidates showed up, exchanged the usual rehearsed lines, and left without making headlines. But what happened that night was anything but predictable. It became the story people could not stop talking about, because in the span of just 30 seconds, a woman turned the tables on her rival so brutally, so flawlessly, that the internet would replay it for weeks to come. The studio lights were mercilessly bright, flooding the stage in a haze of artificial daylight. Cameras were everywhere, red recording lights blinking like watchful eyes. The moderator, seated at the center, shuffled his papers nervously as the audience filled the seats. There was a tension in the air, the kind of tension you could almost taste, part expectation, part dread, and part excitement. On stage, two figures sat across from each other. On one side, the rival loud, brash, overflowing with the confidence of someone who had been told for years that they were unbeatable. His smirk was fixed, his chin slightly raised as if gravity itself worked differently for him. He leaned back in his chair with the smug posture of someone already convinced he had won before the first word had been spoken. The crowd noticed it. People whispered. Some admired his confidence, but others saw arrogance. And across from him sat her. She was calm, composed, almost serene. Where he grinned, she simply waited. Where he radiated self-importance, she radiated focus. She sat upright, hands folded neatly on the table, eyes locked on the moderator. If you didn't know better, you'd think she was outmatched, quiet, reserved, perhaps intimidated. But if you watched closely, you'd see something else. Not weakness, not fear, but strategy. The moderator cleared his throat, his voice booming over the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to tonight's debate. We begin with the first question. And just like that, the moment began. The rival leaned forward, jumping at the opportunity before the question had even landed. His voice dripped with sarcasm. He tossed out a jab so pointed, so obviously rehearsed, that half the audience chuckled before they could stop themselves. He mocked her background, her record, and her credibility, all in one smug, sweeping comment. His smirk widened, satisfied with himself. The camera cut to her. She didn't flinch. She didn't rush to defend herself. She didn't even break eye contact with the moderator. She simply waited. And in that silence, something shifted. The audience's nervous chuckle faded into an uneasy hush, because silence, real silence, can be louder than words. The rival misread it. He thought she had nothing to say. He thought his line had landed. He thought the debate was already his. And so he leaned back once more, stretching out in his chair like a man who believed the battle was over before it had even started. But he was wrong. So very wrong. The camera zoomed in on her face. Her lips curved just slightly half a smile, not of amusement, but of certainty. She knew something no one else in that room had realized yet. She wasn't cornered. She wasn't silenced. She was waiting. The crowd shifted in their seats. Viewers at home leaned closer to their screens. Something was about to happen. And then finally she spoke. Her voice was steady, calm, measured. She didn't match his volume. She didn't throw insults. She simply delivered one fact, one statement, so sharp it cut through the air like a blade. The rival blinked. His smirk faltered. For the first time all night, he didn't look certain. The audience gasped. A murmur spread across the room like wildfire. People glanced at one another, eyes wide, as if silently asking, did she really just say that? Yes, she did. And she wasn't finished. The debate had just taken a turn no one saw coming. And the rival so smug, so sure of himself, had no idea that his undoing was about to unfold in real time. Because what came next wasn't just a counter-argument. It was a roast. A demolition. A 30-second masterclass in timing, delivery, and truth. And when it landed, It would change everything. The cameras caught it all, the tension, the disbelief, the unraveling. The rival's smirk was about to vanish, replaced by something he hadn't felt in years: shock. And in that moment, everyone in the room understood. This wasn't going to be a normal debate. This was going to be a viral moment. But the real story isn't just about what she said. It's about how those 30 seconds rewrote the entire debate, leaving her rival humiliated, the audience electrified, and the internet on fire. And that story begins now. The silence hung in the air like a storm cloud refusing to burst. The rival shifted in his seat, confused by her calmness. He had expected outrage, a flustered defense, maybe even tears. But what he got instead was nothing. And that nothing rattled him more than any angry response ever could. So he tried again. With a flourish of his hand, he leaned forward and launched another jab. This time, his tone was louder, sharper, tinged with impatience. He mocked her experience, her policies, even her voice. The audience laughed, but the laughter was different now. Nervous, uneasy, as if some of them weren't sure they should be laughing at all. And then finally she looked at him. Not with anger, not with fear, but with something infinitely more dangerous: composure. Her eyes locked on his, steady and unblinking. The crowd felt the shift instantly. You could almost hear their collective breath hitch as the tension tightened. She didn't rush. She didn't shout. Instead, she let the silence stretch just long enough to make every single person lean closer, desperate for her response. And then calmly, deliberately, she began. "Funny," she said, her tone low but unwavering. "How much time you spend attacking me when your own record tells a story you never want repeated." The words sliced through the air. The rival's smile flickered, just slightly. A crack in the armor. He leaned back, feigning nonchalance, but his fingers tightened around the edge of his podium. The audience reacted instantly. Gasps, murmurs, heads turning from one candidate to the other as if watching a tennis match where the underdog had suddenly landed an impossible shot. And she wasn't done. In the span of 30 seconds, she unleashed a barrage of fact-specific, undeniable, and devastating. Each sentence was like a hammer striking the same spot over and over until the wall began to crumble. Every boast he had made earlier in the night, she exposed the contradiction. Every jab he had thrown, she turned it back on him. And the best part? She did it with surgical precision. No wasted words, no unnecessary flair. Just truth pure, sharp, and impossible to deflect. The rival tried to interrupt. He stammered, he raised his voice, he even gestured wildly to the moderator. But the moderator wasn't saving him. The moderator was frozen, eyes wide, realizing he was witnessing something that would dominate headlines before the night was over. The audience? They erupted. Some clapped, some gasped, some shook their heads in disbelief. And at home, millions of viewers leaned so close to their screens they could see the beads of sweat forming on his forehead. And here is the thing. It wasn't just what she said. It was how she said it. Calm, controlled, confident. Where he had shouted, she whispered. Where he had sneered, she smiled. And in that contrast, the entire room saw the truth. She wasn't just holding her own. She was winning. The rival knew it too. His smirk was gone. His posture slumped, his eyes darting nervously from her to the audience, then back again. It was the look of a man who had just realized the ground beneath his feet wasn't as solid as he thought. And the clock? It hadn't even been 30 seconds yet. By the time she finished, the studio was buzzing. People were whispering, exchanging looks, clutching their phones as if desperate to start typing what they had just seen. She had roasted him cleanly, decisively, and with the kind of finesse that would make replay buttons everywhere wear thin. But here's the kicker. This wasn't just a debate moment. It wasn't just a viral clip waiting to happen. It was a shift. Because sometimes in politics, a single line, a single exchange, can redefine not just a debate, but an entire career. And in those 30 seconds, she had done exactly that. The rival, red-faced and fumbling, tried to recover. He muttered something about being misrepresented, about fake attacks, but it was too late. The damage was done. The audience wasn't buying it. The silence that met his comeback attempt was deafening. People were still replaying her words in their heads, still savoring the sting of her roast. And across the stage, she simply leaned back, hands folded again, expression calm and unshaken. She had delivered her strike. She didn't need to say more. The camera zoomed in on her face, capturing the quiet confidence of someone who knew she had just owned the moment. And in living rooms across the country, viewers whispered the same thing. She destroyed him. But here's where it gets interesting. Because what happened in that studio didn't stay in that studio. Clips were already being cut, captions already being drafted, hashtags already forming. The 30-second roast was about to leave the debate stage and explode into the digital world. And when it did, the impact would be bigger than anyone in that room could have predicted. The roast was just the beginning. The real story, the ripple effect, the headlines, the social media storm was about to take on a life of its own. And that's when everyone realized this wasn't just a comeback. This was a cultural moment. And it had only just begun. The clip hit the internet like wildfire. Within minutes of the debate wrapping up, someone had already clipped those 30 seconds, slapped on a caption. She cooked him in front of millions and hit upload. By the time the rival walked off stage, the video had already racked up thousands of views. By the time he got into his car, it was trending. And by sunrise the next morning, it was everywhere. Twitter feeds, TikTok loops, Instagram reels, YouTube shorts, it was unavoidable. If you had a screen, you had seen it. And here's the thing. It wasn't just the clip itself. It was the commentary. Creators stitched it. Analysts dissected it. Comedians mocked it. Reaction videos piled up by the hour, people gasping, laughing, replaying that one devastating line over and over. Late-night hosts rewound the footage in slow motion, zooming in on his face as the realization hit. "Ladies and gentlemen," one host quipped, "this is the exact moment his campaign staff started updating their resumes." The audience roared. But the real damage wasn't in the jokes. It was in the headlines. Candidate delivers knockout blow in debate. 30 seconds that changed the election. Rival crumbles under fiery clapback. For years, the rival had crafted an image of being untouchable, quick-witted, and sharp on his feet. But now, that image was shattered. Those 30 seconds played on a loop until the narrative was undeniable. He had been roasted, publicly and thoroughly. And while the internet mocked him, her reputation soared. People who had never paid attention to politics were suddenly asking, "Who is she?" Clips of her old speeches resurfaced, interviews were replayed, and hashtags with her name trended globally. Overnight, she wasn't just another candidate, she was a phenomenon. But let's pause here for a moment. Because while the internet celebrated her victory, inside his campaign headquarters, the atmosphere was chaos. Phones buzzed nonstop. Advisors argued in hushed, frantic tones. Some wanted him to double down, to go on the offensive again, to claim he had been taken out of context. Others begged him to let it go, to pivot to another issue before the damage got worse. He sat at the center of it all, staring at a muted TV screen where his own face looped in humiliation. Every time she delivered that line, he flinched. Every time the audience laughed, his jaw tightened. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was exposure. Because in politics, perception is everything. And perception now said he was vulnerable, weak, beatable. Meanwhile, she wasn't gloating. She didn't need to. She stuck to her script, gave interviews with calm confidence, and crucially didn't oversell it. She let the moment breathe, let the public take ownership of it. That restraint only amplified her power. Think about that. She didn't chase the narrative. She became the narrative. And the public noticed. Clips of her composure after the roast, her sitting quietly, hands folded, expression steady, were praised just as much as the roast itself. Commentators called her disciplined, strategic, even presidential. And all of it fueled the fire. For the rival, though, the fire was burning him alive. He attempted damage control with a morning show interview. He smiled, cracked jokes, tried to dismiss the clip as overblown. But the hosts weren't buying it. They replayed the video right in front of him, forcing him to relive it in real time. His awkward chuckle, his stumbling words, if anything, it made things worse. The comments online were brutal. He's laughing, but you can see the pain in his eyes. Imagine getting destroyed so badly, it follows you into every interview. And here's where the story took an even sharper turn. Because this wasn't just about a roast. It was about trust. Voters who had once backed him began questioning his strength, his judgment, his ability to stand under pressure. Poll numbers shifted. Donors hesitated. Opponents in his own party sniffed blood in the water. All from 30 seconds. But let's not underestimate the cultural impact. Beyond politics, this moment became a meme. A shorthand for poetic justice. Students quoted it in classrooms. Sports commentators used it during replays of epic comebacks. Even brands jumped on it, tweeting cheeky references to getting roasted in 30 seconds or less. It became part of the lexicon. And that's when you realize something bigger. It wasn't just that she roasted him. It was that everyone watching felt it. It tapped into something primal, our love for underdogs, for comebacks, for moments when arrogance finally meets its match. That's why it spread. That's why it stuck. She hadn't just scored a debate win. She had created a cultural moment that would live far beyond the election. And while she gained momentum, her rival faced a decision. Fight harder and risk more humiliation, or step back and quietly fade into the background. The tragedy? Neither option could erase those 30 seconds. Because once the internet crowns you the loser of a viral moment, history doesn't give you do-overs. The roast wasn't fading. It was fossilizing, etched permanently into the story of his career. And the more he struggled, the more that truth became clear. The cameras were long gone. The stage had been cleared. But the echoes of that 30-second roast were still rattling through the halls of power. Her rival sat in his office, lines drawn, staring at a silent screen. It didn't matter which channel he turned to, her face was there. Clips looping, headlines flashing, analysts replaying the moment frame by frame. His own humiliation was being studied like a crime scene. And in a way, it was. Because what had been murdered wasn't just a talking point. It was his credibility. The calls from all eyes slowed. The donors' checks shrank. And his once loyal staff whispered about jumping ship. The empire he had built on bravado and bluster was collapsing under the weight of one truth. He had been outmatched, outwitted, and outclassed in front of the nation. Meanwhile, she was soaring. Her campaign headquarters buzzed like a victory parade. Volunteers poured in, donations spiked, and crowds at her rallies doubled overnight. Reporters who once dismissed her now fought for her quotes. But here's what made it remarkable. She didn't change. She didn't gloat. She didn't taunt. She stood steady, professional, and most importantly ready. And that's the secret no one tells you. It wasn't just the roast that made her rise. It was how she carried it. Because words can light a fire, but composure keeps it burning. Out in the world, the clip had taken on a life of its own. People played it at gatherings, laughing, cheering, rewinding it just to feel that rush again. Students quoted it in debates. Commentators referenced it during sports broadcasts. Even comedians used it as the setup for new jokes. But for the people watching closely, it wasn't comedy. It was clarity. Because beneath the laughs and the memes, something powerful had been revealed. The truth. That arrogance, when exposed, collapses. That confidence without substance is fragile. And that when someone finally dares to stand tall, even the loudest rival can be silenced in seconds. And the rival? He tried. Oh, he tried. He went on the morning shows, forced a smile, insisted he was unfazed. He gave speeches, attacked her character, even claimed the clip had been taken out of context. But no matter what he said, the crowd only heard one thing, that devastating 30 seconds. You cannot erase a moment once it's burned into memory. And so, piece by piece, his influence dwindled. Polls dipped. All eyes distanced themselves. Headlines shifted from his name to hers. The very stage he had once dominated now belonged to someone else. And here's where the story transforms into something bigger than politics. Because this wasn't just about two rivals trading words. It was about the audience, the millions watching, scrolling, sharing, laughing, gasping. It was about ordinary people who felt the weight of injustice tilt, even just a little, back in their favor. For once, the arrogant didn't win. For once, the underdog had the mic. And in that moment, people felt seen. They felt heard. They felt hope. That is why the clip spread. That is why it stuck. Because it wasn't just her victory, it was everyone's. So what do we take away from this? That power built on fear crumbles when faced with truth. That arrogance folds when struck by dignity. And that sometimes all it takes is one sentence, 30 seconds, to shift the course of a conversation, a campaign, even a culture. As the rival faded into political footnotes, she became more than just a candidate. She became a symbol. A reminder that wit, strength, and composure can outshine even the loudest voice in the room. And now, as you sit here replaying that moment in your mind, ask yourself, why did it matter so much? Why did it resonate across screens, across borders, across generations? Because deep down, we all crave it. That moment when the truth finally lands. That moment when the bully gets silenced. That moment when justice, real, raw, undeniable justice feels possible. This was one of those moments. And maybe, just maybe, it won't be the last. So the next time arrogance tries to dominate, the next time power tries to silence, remember her. Remember those 30 seconds. Remember the roast that became a reckoning. Because truth has a way of surviving. And when it hits hard. This is not just a story about a debate. It is a story about us, about what we believe, what we cheer for, and what we refuse to let go unnoticed. And that's why, even years from now, people will still be watching, still laughing, still remembering the night one rival fell in 30 seconds flat. So here's the call to you. Keep watching, keep questioning, keep demanding better. Because if 30 seconds can change everything once, imagine what could happen if we refuse to look away again. Truth wins when we give it the stage. Now it is your turn to share this story. Subscribe for more, and stand with us in exposing the arrogance that thinks it cannot fall. Because as we just saw, it always can.